So this presentation, I'm calling it Of Monarchs, Satyrs, and Ladies. It was put together by Plymouth County Extension. This is a group that serves our entire county, and we do a bunch of free programs. We've got an entomology program, and we also have a 4-H program. The goal is really just to kind of go out there and give outreach education and just try to teach the people within our county different things that they might want to know about. So who am I? As Rachel introduced me, my name is Blake Dinius. This is me. And I like to do a lot of things outdoors. I've always really liked insects, but I just really like exploring the outside, as you'll see in this particular presentation. And this is me. I'm at the top of Mount Washington here. I've got my binoculars, and I was actually using the binoculars to look at butterflies on that trip. Birds as well, but I use them for butterflies too. In my previous life, I worked in research, and this is an example of the kind of research I used to do. It was on honeybees, and we would take this instrument, which is on the left here. That it almost looks like the white kind of tool with the little the tip, the kind of thin, almost like a reed. You can see a honeybee larva on the tip of that. We used to take those and extract them from a honeybee hive and put them in these well plates at the bottom, and we'd feed them and watch them grow. But in my current role, I'm an educator, and so I no longer do honeybee research. I just deliver education, and I deliver it in a variety of different formats. Classrooms, schools, libraries, walks. I even lead butterfly walks, and now we're seeing that we're delivering presentations through Zoom, through the internet. But you can really just think of me as a giant bug nerd. I've loved bugs my entire life, and it's just kind of one of those things where when I got this job, it was more or less a dream job because I could teach people about the thing that I love the most, which is insects. So what are butterflies? Well, butterflies are a group of organisms in the order Lepidoptera. Now this also includes moths, but you can think there's a more or less 27-ish orders of insects, and they're all very, very different. You look at the top left, you've got your grasshoppers, you got your walking sticks, mayflies, beetles, fleas, and you think that butterflies are just one part of the group that includes butterflies and moths. So there's so many different kinds of insects, but for more or less, butterflies are fun because they're big, they're showy, they're colorful. People just really, really enjoy butterflies, and so that's one of the things that we're going to focus on today. So what is Lepidoptera? Well, the word Lepidoptera means scaled wing, and if you look at this pipevine swallowtail, you can see these colors, and a lot of times people will say that like when you have a moth, and I don't know, some people kill moths, but you might get a little bit of the dust. Some people call it like moth dust. That's actually scales, and these scales are actually modified hairs. So it's kind of wild to think that the colors that you see in a butterfly and that dust actually comes from hairs that are basically flattened and squished like a pancake. But if you put the butterfly wing up underneath a microscope, you can really see these scales. And this is what they would look like with like a scanning electron microscope. You can see these scales kind of layered like this, and these are the hairs essentially. And these scales have different properties. One of those things is refracting light in a really fantastic way. And if you can kind of look at this morpho butterfly, it's not necessarily this blue color, but just the way that the light is refracting off of these different kinds of scales. It's creating that color that we visualize, that we can see, that we can perceive when we're looking at this butterfly. We don't have this morpho butterfly here, but this is just really one of the classic examples of how beautiful butterflies can look. So why do we want to watch butterflies? What is the purpose? Why are you all here? And so we're going to kind of get into some of the reasons why people would want to watch butterflies. The first reason is that it's a good way to get exercise. Exercise can be, if you're someone who just can't go to the gym that much, I'm kind of in that role where I just can't, I try to get these exercise regimens in place every New Year's, just like 99% of the population, and I just can't stick with it because going to the gym to me is just plain boring. But going outside and getting walks and viewing the scenery is a really good way to get exercise and keep your mind active and be entertained while you're doing it. So watching butterflies is another thing you can kind of add to your walks, your hikes when you're going outside. They can be very aesthetically pleasing. This is an example of an eastern pine elephant, and it looks really tiny, very hard to see. Sometimes people might just see it as being just kind of a small brown butterfly. Now this butterfly might be about the size of a nickel, so it's really, really small, and most people often miss this kind of butterfly. But if you look at it really close, you can see that this butterfly has all these wild patterns and cool whites, and it's actually really beautiful when you view it close up. Even just the fringes of this wing, I like how it has the black and white patterns kind of alternating. And this is a butterfly that you don't see in a lot of locations, but where you do see it is right here in Plymouth County in Miles Standish State Forest. They really kind of like the Pine Barrens areas. And so you can get your opportunity to see this really, really cool striking butterfly. And by seeing it up close, you can have a new appreciation for how beautiful nature can be. And same thing with some of our other common butterflies. This is a really small butterfly called an American copper. It's a butterfly that I really enjoy looking at. And this is an eastern-tailed blue. Same thing. Just seeing these animals up close, they can just be very pleasing to your eyes. You can look for certain behaviors. You can see this butterfly, it's nectaring from this plant, and it can be kind of fun to just watch that happen. I mean, why else do we go to aquariums and zoos and all these other kinds of places, but to watch animals behave? And so this is one of the reasons why you can kind of go outside and watch the way butterflies behave in the wild. Some people get really kind of over the top when watching butterflies. They get really, really big, and it can become like, if you're into that collecting mindset, and people do this with birds as well, but they create these lists. And so it's like, you know, almost like a bucket list. How many butterflies have you seen? For me this year, I've probably seen about 20 to 30 different species of butterfly. But some people can get really into it, and they just really kind of want to one-up everyone else. And if you're really competitive, or if you ever played the game Pokemon, this can kind of appeal to that kind of mindset where you want to just go and capture them all and see them all. Another reason why we might want to watch butterflies is to have a deeper understanding of nature. And I find that most people, when they're starting to get into insects, at least most people when they come up to me, if they haven't been into looking at insects their entire life, one of the primary reasons motivating them to get back into looking at insects is that they want to connect with nature. They want this deeper understanding. They've realized that the world we live in today can't be the same world if we don't start to understand and conserve insects. And so they want to learn more about how they can help these invertebrates that they've neglected for however old they are. But if you look at this monarch butterfly, you can see it nectaring on this flower. And this is not a milkweed plant, and it's not a milkweed flower, but the monarchs can nectar on just about any kind of flower. But what's really important about monarchs is that their caterpillars are dependent on milkweeds for survival. So you can see this caterpillar is dependent on this plant. And you can think about this plant as also being an organism that's dependent on a certain number of factors. Like this plant might be dependent on the type of soil around, or maybe just the amount of light that particular area is receiving. And so you think that this butterfly is dependent on soil and light and wind and rain and all these other different factors. It kind of like blows your mind, like opens your mind. It starts out as just being, oh, it's a cool butterfly, and just kind of like expands outward into having this ability to perceive that this butterfly would not exist if the conditions for this plant also did not exist. And just kind of going along the theme, I know a lot of people are really into monarchs. If you are thinking about planting from monarchs, planting milkweed, there was this interesting study that came out at the tail end of last year where the particular arrangement of milkweed actually promoted more eggs and caterpillars. So in this example, they planted the milkweed about 1 meter separating the rest, basically this border. If you create this kind of like outline around all of your flowers of milkweed, that actually generated the most number of eggs and caterpillars, versus if it was flipped and you had like the wildflowers on the outside and then the milkweed kind of clustered in the middle, or if you just had them all interspersed. The first arrangement generated more eggs and caterpillars, which I found was really fascinating. And then another thing kind of go along with having a deeper understanding of nature is that there are so many different species of butterfly, and they follow what we call a phenology, which is a general kind of succession of the way things progress throughout the year. So if you look at this chart, each of the bars, and the bigger the bars, it means you're more likely to see that butterfly. So if you look at this eastern pine elephant at the bottom, you're more likely to see it in April, May, maybe early June, but then it kind of goes away from there. But if you look at the hair streaks, now the hair streaks come out, this is prime season for a lot of the hair streaks. And you can see that they kind of follow that pattern. And it's really interesting that pattern might reflect what kind of nectar sources are available or what kind of flowers and plants are available at the given time of year. And so kind of going along the same thought process is that, again, as I mentioned earlier, is that the adult butterflies can nectar on a lot of different plants. And so a lot of times when people are planting, they're planting their pollinator gardens, they're seeing a lot of different butterflies and they're like, oh, my yard must be fantastic because I have so many butterflies and I see so many things. But the adults will go to almost anything. You can plant a yard that is almost exclusively butterfly bush and you'll get a lot of different species of butterfly. But like I mentioned earlier, is that the caterpillars are dependent on certain types of flowers. So it's important that we're either conserving their habitats or planting specifically for those larval butterflies. Again, like the monarchs, they really need those specific, what we call host plants. In a weird way, the butterflies are almost like a parasite of plants. You can kind of think of them like that. And so our American lawns are more or less deserts. And so when you plant these gardens, that's almost like generating a little oasis in the desert. You can kind of think of it like that. The grasses that we have growing in our lawns they're non-native species, and there's not a heck of a lot of things that can live in our lawns. Mostly just the beetles that we don't really like, and invasive crane flies and things like that can live in this grass that we really those are the things we really don't want. But when it comes to other things like bees and butterflies, they're essentially an ecological desert. But you can kind of remedy that by planting and intermixing a lot of different types of flowers. For instance, if you look at this fritillaries really, really like violets. And so planting violets, you can start to not only attract them so that they can nectar on them, but they'll also lay their eggs on these violet plants. And then you've got this red admiral here. It's a really striking butterfly. They really like thistle. And so thistle is one of the things that you can plant. And a lot of people don't really like thistle. They see it as a weed. But when you think if you're spraying and trying to get rid of a lot of these quote unquote weeds, you're destroying a lot of the food that this red admiral will like. And that's kind of one of the issues that we ran into with the monarchs. People used to historically view milkweed as a weed, and they would spray glyphosate on the milkweed to get rid of it. And then we saw that the glyphosate was causing a decline in the monarchs, not necessarily because it was hurting the monarchs directly, but by killing their food source, you're starving them out. And that's kind of the way you want to think about this in terms of the red admiral as well. Black swallowtail really likes parsley, dill, that kind of family of and so if you're kind of a lot of people grow these in their garden and then they see something eating it and they get kind of really worried, but it's kind of like a cost benefit. How much do you like your parsley and dill, or how much do you really want these black swallowtails? And this is a really cool black swallowtail. I planted a lot of dill this year, and it's not because I like it, but I just really wanted all these butterflies in my yard. So I actually ended up planting just to see the butterflies. The pipevine swallowtail, we'll go to this Dutchman's pipe. So that's one of the things, or you can plant as well, or like Aristolochia is really kind of that's the group of plants that you want to plant to attract the pipevine swallowtail. This particular swallowtail we tend to see it more further south. I want to say that Massachusetts is more at its more northernmost range. I've seen them in Wareham, and I've seen them in like Marion and Mattapoisett, but I really haven't seen them further than that. I've never seen them in Norwell, for instance, or Hingham. And then you've got this indigo dusky wing, where it used to feed on wild indigo, but it has adapted to turtlehead. And so you can if you think about things like that, and these are plants that typically people don't just plant in their yard, but that you might find just walking around. And so really I wanted to highlight this because sometimes people will pick and kind of groom their lawns and pluck out all these flowers that are really just their food source for things like this wild indigo dusky wing. A Baltimore checker spot. Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't turtlehead in the previous slide. That was it's the Baltimore checker spot that's adapted to the turtlehead and the English plantain. So my mistake on that. But the Baltimore checker spot used to feed on turtlehead, and now it's adapted to English plantain. If you're looking for more tips on gardening for butterflies, this is a pretty decent guide that you can go look at and reference. It's by Sharon Stitcher. I tend not to recommend lists, at least when it comes to bees, because we have so many different kinds of bees. But when it comes to butterflies, there aren't as many butterflies as there are bees, and so you can kind of cater to more or less certain types of butterflies by planting from these lists. And this Sharon Stitcher's list is probably the most comprehensive list that I have seen to date. Another reason why you would want to kind of focus on butterflies is that we tend to be more of a vertebrate centric in our perception of the world. A lot of people know about blue whales and, save blue whales, the endangered blue whales, but how many people know about the endangered Carner blue butterfly? And so not many people know about this butterfly, yet we know about the blue whale. And if you look at the kind of the range of this Carner blue, ever since it was listed as being endangered, it has declined, and that range has contracted since that point. If you look at this map, the shaded in area with that have the red arrows pointing to, that's the current range. And then the blue area, the light blue, that was the historical range when it was listed as endangered. And then the purplish area, that's the range of the wild blue lupin. So that's its host plant. And so you can see that even though its host plant is far greater than this butterfly, it only exists in these small pockets. And we're not entirely sure, what is going on. Even though you have all the right plants, you've got all the right ingredients, what is it about this butterfly? Why is it declining? I'm not entirely sure. And part of the reason why we think that, a lot of the reasons why we kind of find these endangered insects, and then it's almost like as if we're saving them from the brink of extinction as soon as we find them, once again, it has to do with the fact that we tend to be more vertebrate-centric. We focus a lot on mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, amphibians. But in this particular study in 2001, 19 years ago, it kind of highlighted this. And this is kind of an excerpt, is that we may never know how many invertebrate species are at risk because it's biased in favor of vertebrates. And that's what they found based on this study, is that we really tend to focus on big, charismatic organisms. And when you think about just the number of undiscovered insects there are, there's 303 undiscovered mammals worldwide. But the number of insects, there's 30 million undiscovered insects worldwide. And so the number of undiscovered insects, it's just because we don't have people looking for them. You even have insects where we've never even seen the larval stage of these. And so when you think about all the things that we see, that science is just expanding more and more outward. It's expanding the most in the realm of insects. So you're always going to have something to learn and something to figure out if you ever wanted to go in and study insects. For example, there was actually a new tiger swallowtail that was discovered about 10 years back, and this was called the Appalachian tiger swallowtail. And so this is a really large, if anyone's ever seen a tiger swallowtail, they're these large yellow butterflies, and they actually discovered a new species of tiger swallowtail 10 years ago in the United States. And so you think that like there must be everything discovered, every kind of butterfly must already be discovered, but that's not even the case. And you can see this Appalachian tiger swallowtail in the back here. It's this really, really big tiger swallowtail. And that's kind of the way it appears. You can see it's much, much different. And it took a group of researchers to really look at this and to really go and figure it out. But this tiger swallowtail had existed, for centuries, maybe even thousands of years before anyone gave it a name. And we had been living in this country the entire time. It was right under our noses. So in Massachusetts, there are over 100 species of butterflies. Some of them are really difficult to see. Some of them you might only find in Western Massachusetts. They can be pretty localized, but just in your own backyard, you can find quite a bit. This time of year, given about 30 minutes, I might easily find about 10 different species of butterfly just in my backyard. And that's, that's a reasonable estimate if you're just kind of like walking around in your backyard. So you can find quite a bit. You don't have to really drive out to Western Mass, but going back to the people who really like to collect butterflies, sometimes they can get really into that zone and they'll go just about anywhere just to see a butterfly. And here's the other reason, and this is probably the reason why I like to watch butterflies. In your daily life, what do you have going on, right? You've got maybe school, you've got maybe all these things you need to plan, weddings, things on your bucket list. You got work, maybe bogging you down, driving you nuts. You've got social media that just constantly makes you feel depressed, like you're not doing enough. You've got the news that might bring terrible things, terrible news that you couldn't even bear to watch. And you've got all these people telling you, exercise more, eat healthy, reduce stress. Nothing makes you more stressed than people telling you to reduce stress. I mean, that is a fact. And then again, like your bucket list, all these things you need to do before you die, and when you think about it, right? So there's just overwhelming the amount of things that you can have going on in your life. And so for me, I'm the kind of person where I can maybe be like a workaholic, or I can just really kind of go. And I don't make a lot of time for myself. But with butterflies, it almost forces you to slow down. Like there's the concept like stop and smell the roses. With butterflies, if you're walking too fast, you're gonna miss them. And so it just kind of forces you to kind of get into this mode where it's almost like the Zen experience. And there's gonna be a lot of butterflies. I'll tell you this, right now, there's gonna be a lot of butterflies. You're gonna see them and they're gonna fly away. You're gonna study them and try to memorize them. And you're gonna see this bright orange flash and it's gonna be gone. And you're going to be, at first you're going to be frustrated, but after a while you kind of live to learn, you learn to live with it. And you're just like, you just become happy that something that beautiful can exist in this world. And it gives you a lot of peace. And that's one of the reasons why I like to watch butterflies. If I'm feeling really stressed out, there's almost nothing that would really calm me down more than going out for a walk and looking at butterflies. And it can be almost this like meditative process where you're stopping, you're walking slow, you're taking in the fresh air, you're looking for butterflies, and you're even listening too. Like I'll listen for birds. And so once again, it can kind of be this kind of like process that just really, really relaxing. So what do we need to get started? Given my spiel, and if I haven't convinced you that watching butterflies is worth your time, then I've run out of kind of ammo. So for those that are kind of on board, what are the tools you need? First off, you need a sense of adventure. You're not going to get anywhere if you're just hoping for someone to kind of show you the way. You really need to want to go and explore. You need something to see them with. Having a pair of binoculars or something is almost indispensable. And this is really where the cost is going to be. But you don't need to spend that much. The quality of the lens really will help. If you look at the photo on the left, this is what a really crisp, clear image of a butterfly would look like. The photo on the right, you can still make out a lot of features, but it's just not as enjoyable. And so that's really what you're mostly paying for when you pay for a higher quality of binoculars. Here's kind of two examples. The pair on the left is the pair I use. These are called the Celestron Nature DX. And then the pair on the right, and these were about like $100, and the pair on the right was about $30 or $40. And they'll work fine too. So you don't, like, some people look at binoculars and they'll see like $500. Yeah, they're better, but you don't have to get that. It's almost like, if you think about like wine or like vodka or any of these drinks or beer, the bottom shelf you really don't want, but like top shelf isn't that much different. You go kind of somewhere in the middle is really what you're going for. And these are some good quality binoculars that you can get, and they'll serve you just fine. But if you're looking for shopping around for binoculars, maybe you need to shop around your budget, you're looking for something different, here are some tips that I can give you. The most important thing for looking at butterflies and just insects in general is you want a short minimum focus on the binoculars. This is usually not something that is heavily advertised in the binoculars, but something you might need to ask about or look into. So you want something at least 10 feet and less. And ideally for butterflies, you want 6 feet, 6 feet and under. That's what you're looking for. And this is because you can get really close to the butterfly and it will fill up that full field of view and you'll get a really good look at it. If you kind of look at this butterfly on the left, that might be what it looks like if you're, if you're 10 feet away, and if you look at the one on the right, that might be about 6 feet away. And you can see that you can see a lot more details, and you can just appreciate a lot more when it's filling up your entire field of view. The next thing would be magnification power. And this is the number on the left. So when you ever look at numbers, it'll say like 7x32, for instance. That red number, that first number, is how much it's going to be magnified. And you don't need this to be a really big number, especially when you have good close minimum focus. You can just walk closer, but that's what that number means. So anywhere from like 7 to 10 is probably a good range that you want to shoot for. The second number is the objective lens size. And this is going to be the number that determines how much light is let in. And so you can see the different images. The one on the left, you've got a nice bright image, and then the one on the right is a little bit darker, but you can still see it, but it's just a little bit darker. The thing about the objective lens size is that's going to also determine how big the binoculars are. So really big objective lens size might be really bulky and really heavy, and if you're not going into the woods to look at butterflies, you're just in a really bright backyard, you might be able to get by with a smaller objective lens size. But I like to have the bigger objective lens because I like to go into the woods and look at different things in the woods. And so that's what I went for. And the third thing you're going to need is something to record what you see. If you're into this whole like butterfly checklist or life list, that's keeping a running checklist can be really important. Or there's a lot of organizations like the Massachusetts Butterfly Club, and also this eButterfly is an online organization, and they're going to be tracking rare species. So if you do see a rare species, it can be really important that you record that and that you share it, because that's going to help them conserve them. Okay, so you found something cool, right? What are you going to do now? How do you know how to identify butterflies? Well, the most important thing, probably the best way is you're going to need a good field guide. I tend to prefer the Kaufman's field guide of butterflies up here. I just really like this guide. I've got this guide right here. I just really like the images. I feel like the almost like the painted images, to me, are a little bit better than photographs, but this is more just a personal choice. Most people, what I find, tend to prefer Jeffrey Glassberg's guides, either the Swift Guide to Butterflies or the Butterflies Through Binoculars. So they'll both work. I've got all of them. And like I said, I just tend to prefer Kaufman's just because that's my own personal preference. When you start identifying butterflies, it can start to be really hard, especially when you get into certain species. Like this is Juvenile's dusky wing, and this is Horace's dusky wing, and they're different species. But to be perfectly honest, there are experienced people that watch butterflies that still can't tell the difference between the two. And that's going to happen, and it's okay. It's just one of those things you just kind of have to be okay and just say, that was a dusky wing, and I'm okay with that. Phone apps are another good way you can identify butterflies. And I don't typically recommend phone apps for insects, and that's because there are so many different species, and very often we need identifying features like spines on their forelegs or number of hairs on their back, things that you just can't capture that well in a photograph. But for butterflies, there are many, many good pictures, and the phone apps are really good for things that have a very extensive database of pictures. So they can be very helpful when it comes to butterfly watching. But the issue with a lot of these apps is that they're only as good as the photo quality, and they're also only as good as the community supporting it. And so for the app that I would recommend is Seek by iNaturalist, or just the default iNaturalist app. Those can be really good apps. So if you're into the kind of phone app type deal, then you can go with that. So how do you find butterflies? What are you looking for, and what kind of environments would you find them in? Butterflies are gonna, in general, butterflies like sunny, warm days from 10 to 2 when the sun's out, not very windy. A day like today would have been a really good day for butterfly watching. Yes, it did rain later on, but overall it wasn't too hot. It was just kind of nice and sunny and warm. And so these are going to be really nice days for butterfly watching. They tend to, I usually tell people they tend to like the same days that people like to go outside in. When you're looking at butterflies, one thing that can frustrate people a lot is that the butterflies will just simply fly away. So you really want to get kind of focus on creeping up on them, walking really slowly, really carefully to prevent them from walking away. Sometimes I'll be in the woods and I will honestly be walking like this man here. I will be walking that slow. And it's not because I have like poop in my pants or whatever. It's because I'm looking for butterflies. It's just kind of something that you just get into, and I don't even notice that I do it. It took, when I'm walking, like when I'm hiking in the White Mountains or whatever, I take so much longer than everyone else, but that's, I do things my way. That's just kind of my motto. You do you, right? And I'll do me. One of the other things is that you don't want to let your shadow scare them. Sometimes people will be like, I'm walking slow, and they can just keep running away from me. Do I smell bad? What's going on? Watch your shadow and maybe even make like a circle around so that your shadow, it's always is never facing them, because your shadow will spook them if you let that shadow cover them. You want to look for in different heights. Look high. A lot of your big butterflies will tend to fly high. Some of your tiger swallowtails can be found at the tops of trees. Some of your medium-sized butterflies, like this American lady, will be found maybe chest height. And then look at your feet, because your eastern-tailed blue will be found kind of like really maybe ankle height. And then they can be found like this question mark might be found maybe at the edges of forests or in woods. So you kind of want to be looking all around. That's kind of the rule of thumb. Walking slowly, looking all around, and that's how it's almost like when I go outside, it's almost like a Where's Waldo for me every single day. And so different habitats mean different plants, and as we went over earlier, is that the different plants can mean different butterflies. And so your backyard is going to most mimic a meadow, so you're going to find certain butterflies that are going to be really fond of that meadow type habitat. But deciduous forests, coniferous forests are going to have different types of butterflies. Beaches, or this special habitat is called an ecotone. This is where you might have like a forest habitat that meets a meadow habitat. This border area, that's what we call the ecotone. And you can find certain species that are unique to the ecotones. So Miles Sanders State Forest, this is like one of my favorite stomping grounds because you can find a lot of really unique species here. You've got, like we went over earlier, you've got the eastern pine elephant on the right, and you've got a frosted elephant on the left. These are some pretty unique butterflies that you tend not to find in many other locations. Douglas S. Westgate property down in Wareham. This is more kind of like a wetland woods habitat. So you're going to find some common wood nymphs, little wood satyrs. And so these are going to become more woodland type butterflies. You can find red admirals here as well. A lot of dragonflies at that habitat as well. Cumberland Farms IBA in Middleborough and Halifax. This is going to be more like a meadow type habitat. And so you might find, no, you're not going to find Bigfoot there. You're going to find common buckeyes, maybe your sulfurs. You can find some American ladies. You can find some butterfly monarchs, viceroys. A lot more like the meadow type butterflies. And so if you think about like going to different locations, kind of expanding out your knowledge base, you can find a lot of different butterflies there. And I'm going to apologize right now to Wildlands Trust. I should have included more Wildlands Trust properties on this webinar, but I will for next time. That's on me. So here's our butterfly ID crash course, and I'm going to tell you right now, this information probably will not stick, but we're going to go through a quick quiz, and I'm going to show you a bunch of different identifying features, and hopefully this will kind of stoke your interest in getting out there and identifying some butterflies. So butterflies in general come in 3 different sizes. If you take your hand, and this is kind of for grown adults, your hand, the length of your hand from your middle finger to the base of your palm, that's going to be about the wingspan of a tiger swallowtail. So you kind of look at that, and this is the kind of the metric that you want to use to measure how big a tiger swallowtail is going to be. It's about the size of your hand. So you think about maybe like 4 to 5 inches. That's going to be, if you kind of look at this hand, it's large. So these are your large butterflies. This is your tiger swallowtails. Then you have your medium-sized butterflies, which are the step down from that. And these are going to be like your American ladies, for instance. And you look at the same kind of hand, you can see that these butterflies are maybe a little bit bigger than a silver dollar, if people remember what silver dollars look like. And then you have your small butterflies, which might be about the size of your thumbnail when they have their wings closed. And so they go from about the size of your hand, maybe all the way down to about the size of your thumbnail. And so those are going to be on the small end. So your tiger swallowtail, really easily recognizable butterfly. You know, it's a tiger because it's got these stripes. It's black and yellow. There's almost nothing else here that looks like it. We do have one other giant swallowtail. It's called the giant swallowtail. That one is not found very often, but that one's, the two yellow butterflies are almost not to be confused with almost anything else. The reason I'm bringing up tiger swallowtails is because we do have a dark form of this tiger swallowtail. The females can have this dark form, and one of the ways you can tell that it's a dark phase of this tiger swallowtail is that it doesn't have stripes or like specks on. It's basically almost a completely dark body, and that's the way you can tell it's this dark form. And it's only the females that do this. The males will never look like this dark form. We have an actual black swallowtail. So even the black swallowtail is not as black as the dark form of the tiger swallowtail. And the black swallowtail, you can always recognize, it's got a bunch of different features, but it does have the presence of these black dots. If you look at the tail, it's got these 2 black dots encircled by orange, and it's got this orange mark on the inner part of its hind wing, and it's got spots. You see how it has these spots on its abdomen. And so the big things to remember with the black swallowtail, it's a big black butterfly, and it's got these black dots on its hind wing. Spicebush butterfly, very similar to the black swallowtail, but it does not have those black dots, and it has this comet or swoosh in its hind wing. So spicebush almost sounds like swoosh. It's got that comet on its hind wing. The black swallowtail has a black dot, and the tiger swallowtail doesn't have these spots. One of the reasons why I read this on the internet, ways that I remembered the black form of the tiger swallowtail is they say tigers don't have spots. And so all these other black swallowtails have spots, but the tiger swallowtails do not. And then your red spotted purple. This is going to be a little bit smaller than your dark swallowtails, but I'm bringing it up because sometimes people think it looks like a dark swallowtail, but it doesn't have the swallowtails. It doesn't have the tails, so you can tell it's red spotted purple from there. I think of them almost like orange spotted blues, but people call them red spotted purples for some reason. And then the red spotted purple, the same species is the white admiral. So they're actually 2 different morphs of the same species, and this is the white admiral. So here's our first quiz. Can anyone tell me what butterfly this is? It's got spots on its body, and it has 2 black spots on its hind wing. So if you wanted to use the chat feature, I'll take the first person to answer what butterfly they think this is. And it's a big butterfly too. It's not a medium butterfly.
Carlos says black swallowtail.
And Carlos would be correct. This is the black swallowtail. And you can see that right here. Once again, it's got the black swallowtail. You can really separate it from the others by the black dots. So next up, we're going to have like medium-sized orange butterflies. And the first butterfly we have here is the American lady. The American lady always is going to have this white dot on its hind wing. Oh no, sorry, its upper forewing. And the other way I can remember the American lady, it's got this funky black pattern where it has like 2 black dot kind of I don't want to call them spots, but 2 black markings, and they're separated. This is the way I can always recognize American ladies. But if you only get a view of the underside, it's got 2 eye spots, so it only has 2 of them. So American lady has 2. It's got the white dot, and it has separate black markings. The painted lady is a little bit different. It looks very, very similar, but for astute observers, they'll notice that it doesn't have the white dot, and that black marking is connected. The other thing about the painted lady is it doesn't have 2 eye spots, it has many. It has 4 or 5 different eye spots. So it looks very similar, but if you look at this black marking, it can never lead you wrong. If it's connected, painted lady, not connected, American lady. Monarchs, I'm not going to go over this too much because everyone knows what a monarch butterfly looks like. They're pretty easily recognizable. But we do have something that looks very similar called a viceroy. The viceroy has this marking in the back. So if you look at it has this vein that kind of wraps around, and it has you can see on the upper and lower sides of the viceroy, it's always going to have this kind of black line that runs horizontal. Monarch butterflies will never have that. And the viceroy, just a little thing, it has a slightly different border, but you don't need to remember that if you can always remember this black vein right here. Common buckeyes, really easily recognizable, not too many features to go over here. If you see a butterfly with tons of eye spots like this and it's orangish, common buckeye. So next question, what butterfly is this? It's got a white dot and these black markings are separated.
Mary says American lady.
It is an American lady, and Mary would be correct.
We have some other people with correct answers. Now you guys know. Now you're cheating.
Yeah, you're getting into it now. So now we have these medium-sized, like white and yellow butterflies. These are what we call the whites and sulfurs. The first one is probably the most common, most ubiquitous butterfly you're going to find in your backyard. It's called the cabbage white, and it's got these black dots on its wings, right? The females have 2 and the males have 1. It also tends to have this black tips towards the end, but as far as the black on the wings go, that's it. It never has a black margin. See, the black is usually just on the tips alone, if that. Sometimes it's not even on the tips. Next up, we have the clouded sulfurs. These are pretty common as well. These are yellow butterfly, and if you look, the major difference between this and the cabbage whites is that they're yellow for one, but they've got this black border that runs along the length of the forewing and high wing. And so that's the ways you can separate these clouded sulfurs and cabbage whites. Then we have the orange sulfur, which is like a clouded sulfur, but it's orange. And this can be really confusing. Sometimes you'll see a butterfly and it'll be really faded and it'll be really lightly colored. And in that particular case, you might not be able to tell the difference between an orange and a clouded sulfur. You can just say, that was a sulfur. And then, like I said, you get the Zen kind of feeling and you're just okay with it. But if you do see a very orangey butterfly with it's a very pigmented border. That's the big way you can tell the orange butterflies from the clouded sulfur, is that they're a lot more heavily pigmented. And see this black border is very, very thick and very pronounced. And they're also kind of this, I guess craft singles orange is the way you kind of want to describe the color. It's not like a true orange, it's just this like yellowy orange color. And that's the way you can kind of separate it out. And the black border from the underneath is thicker. And that's something that will come through experience, is that black border is thicker in the orange sulfur than the clouded sulfur. So question number 3, what's this butterfly? It is a kind of a medium-sized butterfly. It's got a thin-ish black border. Can anyone tell me what this butterfly is just based on the underneath side?
Who is it gonna be? I think you've stumped them, Blake. Okay,
someone got it.
Yeah, clouded sulfur.
Yeah, that's a clouded sulfur.
Mary for the win again. All right.
Yep, and so the difference between the clouded sulfur and the orange sulfur, once again, is that the clouded sulfur has a thin-ish kind of black border, and the orange sulfur has a thicker one. And then the cabbage whites will never have that. Next up, we have our very small butterflies, the small blue or gray butterflies that you're going to find in your backyard. This is an eastern-tailed blue. You can tell it's an eastern-tailed blue because it has the tails and it's blue. That's basically the major reasons how you can tell the difference. But there are a few different things that look similar to this eastern-tailed blue. What I also want you to pay attention to is on the underside, do you see all these black spots? Almost looks like a Dalmatian. That's a really important pattern. You don't need to remember exactly what it looks like, but just remember that it has those black dots. Spring azure looks a lot like the eastern-tailed blue, but it doesn't have the tails. There's also summer azure and spring, cherry gull azure. The spring azures is what we call a complex of species, where they're all more or less look the same, and they're very, very difficult to separate in the field. But even for me, I just call them all spring azures, and that's one of those things that is okay. Gray hair streak looks a lot like an eastern-tailed blue, but it's gray. It's got different shaped tails, and if you look at the pattern on these wings, they're different than what you saw in the eastern-tailed blue. It's not these spots that look like a Dalmatian. Instead, it's almost like a row of almost like half an Oreo cookie. It's got like, if you took the top off an Oreo cookie, it almost has half of that, kind of like a row of that. And so it's different from the eastern-tailed blue in that regard. So question number 4, what's this butterfly? It's a blue butterfly and it has a tail. This one should be fairly easy.
Mary again.
Man, Mary's fast. Maybe she already knows. Maybe she already knows a lot about butterflies, and this is all a refresher. But yeah, everyone else is coming through pretty good. The big things to pay attention to is that the spring azure does not have these tails. So the tail, really important feature. Next up, we've got small orange butterflies. This is our American copper. It's got these black dots, fairly easily recognizable. Got a thick orange band on the hind wing. Pearl crescent does not have that. It has a different, almost like this mottled lacy pattern. But one of the reasons why it's called a pearl crescent is that it has like a white crescent. So they call it a pearl crescent. It's almost like a white spot, more or less. You can kind of see where this arrow is pointing to. And that's not always going to show up, but you can kind of get it into the habit. Like the two most common small orange butterflies you're going to find in your lawn, pearl crescent and American copper. But you might actually find this silver bordered fritillary, and this is bigger than a pearl crescent. That's the one way they can kind of stand out from a pearl crescent, is this is going to be bigger. It's going to be almost the size. It's going to be like the size of a painted lady, or an American lady, sorry. And the underside is going to have this pattern where it's like 4 white spots with a black spot in the middle. And so that's kind of the way you want to recognize silver bordered fritillary. So next question, what's this butterfly? It's got a white crescent on its hind wing. Oh, Carlos got it this time. Yep, pearl crescent. And that's kind of what based on its namesake. It's the pearl crescent. Next up, we've got the brown butterflies. And I think this is the last of these types of questions. So we'll kind of get through this as quick as possible, I guess. So this is a brown butterfly you might find in your backyard called littlewood satyr. It's got these eye spots, almost looks similar to a common buckeye, but it's brown. And common wood nymph. And the best way to tell the two apart is the common wood nymph has this yellow marking on the forewing, but the littlewood satyr does not. So no yellow marking, littlewood satyr, yellow marking, common wood nymph. Silver spotted skipper, it's actually a skipper. It's a special kind of butterfly. They've got like these hooked antennae. The wing shape is very different. It's very weird. It's got this like triangular wing shape, and it's called the silver spotted skipper because it has this white spot on the underneath of its hind wing. And then we have the common ringlet. This is a really small butterfly. It is a brown butterfly. This is going to be the most common brown butterfly you're going to find in your backyard. And you can notice it's called a common ringlet because it's got this black ring on the underneath of its forewing right here. So what's this butterfly? this is a little wood satyr, because the common wood nymph has the yellow marking, but the little wood satyr does not. So if you're having trouble getting some of this stuff to stick, I'll be honest, like this, I can't remember everything. I don't have like one of those like photographic memories, or I can't just look at something and absolutely remember it. I have to go through this kind of process of learning them. One of the things that I would recommend is you just take it one step at a time. Like learn the really big, easily recognizable things. The swallowtails are really easy to memorize. The medium orange butterflies come next, the sulfurs and whites. And then save like the skippers and the small butterflies for last, because they can be like really, really challenging to see. And if you just you'll start to accumulate the knowledge over time. It might take years to learn all the different butterflies. Focus on the common species and then learn how to distinguish them from ones that look similar. So this is a gray hair streak like we went over today, but it looks a lot like the oak hair streak down on the bottom left and the red banded hair streak on the bottom right. And so you can kind of try to learn like the slight differences between them and try to figure that out from there. You can join guided walks. So Massachusetts Butterfly Club puts together a number of walks. I've led walks, Sippacan Lands Trust, Wareham Land Trust, Wildlands Trust. They can lead a bunch of different walks, and you can go with someone and they'll be pointing out different types of butterflies, and it can be really fun. It can be a really really fun social experience. Hopefully when things kind of return back to normal, we'll be able to do a lot more of these types of walks. You can go to butterfly houses. Magic Wings in South Deerfield is a really good place, or Butterflies of Cape Cod and Bourne. These can be really fun places to take kids to, where you just walk in and the butterflies are just kind of flying everywhere, and they'll teach you a lot about the different butterflies and the different host plants that they go to. And last but not least, if at first you don't succeed, try again. This is definitely a learning process, and it's kind of one of those things where you just need to be able to enjoy the ride. And so at this point, I'll take any questions. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the presentation. And if you have any pictures of butterflies, I'm happy to identify them as well.
Oh, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Blake.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, that was fun. So for questions, let's go back into our Zoom meeting. Let's have you stop sharing your screen. I will send that contact information to everybody in a follow-up email. And you all can either use the chat feature to type a question in, or you can use that hand raise feature if you'd like to ask your question in person. You can come off mute. So you will go to participants and then click raise hand in the bottom. And I'll see your hand come up. But while those are coming in, I have a question for you, Blake. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the safety of keeping the butterfly safe while people are out. I know sometimes, especially with like the younger kids, they can be a little gung-ho to catch butterflies in a net. Do you recommend that people do that? How can you do it safely, or just in general, how can we not injure these creatures while we're watching them?
So in general, netting, you should only do if you have a lot of experience with. Butterflies are really, really fragile, and they can be damaged really easily. And so we tend not to recommend that people use nets when they're observing them. That's why the binoculars are so handy. I would just say for most people, I'd recommend not using a net unless you really know what you're doing. I think it'd be hard to catch a butterfly if you had little kids chasing them, but I guess it's possible. I would just recommend keeping your distance, using binoculars, not trying to interfere with them.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, we've had a few walks where we had our leader catching them, but he was highly trained and he didn't let anybody else use the net.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it going along those same lines. When I lead walks, I don't even bring my net because I don't want kids seeing it and then their parents like getting them a net and then them being inexperienced using it.
Oh, we have a question in the chat from Sue. She wants to know if there's a Canadian yellow swallowtail.
Yes. So the tiger swallowtail is actually the tiger swallowtail we're going to see here in Massachusetts, there's actually two different species. One is the eastern tiger swallowtail and one is the Canadian tiger swallowtail. That's a good point. The Canadian tiger swallowtail tends to be found further north than the eastern tiger swallowtail. So like, I want to say like right around where we live in like Plymouth County, that's kind of like an intergrade zone. And the further north you get, like north of Boston, you tend to get more of a mix of the population as well. And then in Maine, you almost exclusively find like the Canadian versions. The Canadian, they're very similar. The Canadian tiger swallowtail, you're gonna have to, you can kind of look it up in a book. I don't want to go over it too much, but there's some slight differences in the wing patterns, in the size as well. It's a good question. What is the difference between moths and butterflies? From Robert. Robert has that question. So that's a tough question. So usually what people will tell you is that butterflies will have different antennae. That's one of the ways that they'll typically tell you that the difference is that butterflies have clubbed antenna and moths have either like a filament antenna or like a feathery antenna. That's actually not true, 100% true all the time. So any of the rules separating moths and butterflies are never 100% true. Like some people will tell you that moths kind of land with their wings flat and butterflies land with their wings closed, but the dusky wings almost all land with their wings flat. And so there's really exceptions to everything. And even the colors, like if you really want to have your mind blown by a really wild kind of moth, look up the sunset moth. This is the most, it looks like Lisa Frank puked all over this butterfly. Sorry, puked all over this moth. It is a moth and it is like every color of the rainbow and it looks exactly like a butterfly and it even flies during the day. There are, even for like researchers, they thought it was a butterfly for a very long time until it was reclassified as a moth. And so really kind of to wrap things up and not ramble on too much is that there's really no difference. There's just an arbitrary group of organisms we decided to call butterflies.
I just wanted to say, Blake, that was amazing. Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos. I appreciate it. Glad you liked it.
Agreed. You always make me laugh so hard. It makes me we were in person so I could hear hopefully everybody laughing with me.
I have a terrible sense of humor, so I always like giving presentations to Rachel because she laughs at my jokes. Because my girlfriend doesn't laugh at them, so at least someone does.
Yeah, I'm a fan. All right, I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Have a safe drive home. See, I have a bad sense of humor too.
I liked it though. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone showing up.
Thank you again, Blake. And I'll
Thanks,
send everybody
Rachel.
a follow-up email with Blake's info. And Blake, we can talk about some information that we can share with folks as well.
Sounds good.
All right. Good night, everybody.